Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica and our long-running series, the Unported Playlist, where I take a look at some of my favorite unported arcade games of all time. And today we have Hard Dunk from Sega running on the System 32 multi-board. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and that notification bell definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But this game is both awesome and based on the Sega System 32 arcade board, which means I love it twice over. And the only difference between the System 32 and the Multi is this was a multi-JAMA interface board to have dual screen play, and I will show that in a little bit. But obviously, if you can't tell already, it is a basketball game, but it is done in the Sega Superscaler style. So all of those sprites, all of the backgrounds have this really amazing scaling ability to it. And this is the same board that ran OutRunners, which I have a video on. I'll leave a link to the description below. And I just love Sega sprite scaling stuff. Everything on the System 16, System 32, all of those sprite scaling games, the Superscalers, they just have such a nostalgic look to them. But what is nostalgia if the game isn't good? And I will say this may not rise to the level of something like NBA Jam, but Hard Dunk is a legitimate fun game, especially if you have a second player to play with. This game 100% comes alive when you have a second person in the room, whether you own an original PCB and have two TVs set up, or whether you emulate this, because the nice thing in emulation, you can do a 2-up screen running at the same time and play, and because it's a 4x3 game, if you put this onto a 16:9 television, it fits near perfectly and each person gets a screen, which is incredible. Sega didn't make a ton of sports games like other manufacturers did. They had some, but what they made was awesome, and it's basically just 3-on-3 basketball with a very big emphasis on hard dunks. Obviously, the name of the title would be weird if it wasn't a thing in the game. But I will say off the top, this game likes to take your quarters, even on easy mode. Playing against the CPU, there's going to be situations in which suddenly when they're down a few points, they are going to drain every single basket that they possibly can. Once you get to like level 3, they can just hit 3-point shots, which are going to count as 2 points in this game, basically 100% of the time. So when I say this is a game that is best played with another human being, I 100% mean that, because trying to beat the CPU and see the end of this game is not going to be easy, but we won that match, and I love when you dunk for the win. There's basically like an atomic fireball explosion just coming from the hoop. It's a small effect, but it just kind of ties in the whole arcadey nature of this game, which I love so much. So this one came out in 1994, about a year and a half after the release of NBA Jam. If you believe release schedules for arcade games online, let me tell you, 9 out of 10 times they are not accurate compared to home console game releases. But I'm sure Sega saw the success of NBA Jam, and they wanted in on the basketball genre. And even though these are just made-up characters compared to NBA Jam using authentic NBA licensed characters and teams, it still has a lot of fun and personality. It is interesting too to delineate who you're playing against, that the opposing team is basically in grayscale where your team is in full color. It's a really good stylistic choice to make it so that you can see your team very easily and you are not confused as to who your opponent is. But obviously, being basketball, the mechanics are relatively simple. You can dunk, you can shoot, and you can try to block or swipe the ball away from the players. Although I will say that the swiping, sometimes it feels like it works really well, and other times when you're winning too much, I do think that this game in code has some ability to basically gimp your players and make it so that their stats are much lower. But these dunks are just incredible, and I love the super scaling technology that Sega had in the System 32. It is just aged really well, and when you see that background zoom in, sure it's pixelated, but not many 2D arcade boards could push that many sprites and backgrounds around while scaling them at the same time. And because this is the multi-board, it can do it with 2 instances of the game running, basically networked together, which is always fun. But this game also has a really charming early to mid-90s soundtrack, so go ahead and listen for like 45 seconds and I'll come back and talk more about the history of Hard Dunk in the Sega System 32. But enjoy!
Hey. No, you can't! All right. Here! Up we go! No, you can't! Hey. All right. Basketball! You can't! Hey! All right. Win!
just got that classic Sega soundtrack of the 90s, but I will say if you do want to play this game, I've encountered a situation where it is in stereo, but for some reason the audio only comes out of the left channel for music and the right channel for sound effects. So in editing, I obviously just mix that down to a mono so you get audio out of both channels. But if you do find that that's a situation on an original board, or if you're emulating it, just go ahead and mix it down to mono. It'll be a lot better, because I have seen some people talk about online that the audio has a problem with this game, so you just need to mono it down. That stereo separation is not functioning as it should, but it's fun that it at least has stereo. But if you are looking for an original PCB of this game, how much is it going to run you? Well, I really don't know, because I couldn't find an example of this sold in like the last year or so. It is definitely going to be a rarer game, so whatever the price you want to pay for it is probably going to be the value of the board, because this isn't something that you're going to get a chance to buy every single day. But every time I say that, inevitably the video comes out and 3 are available on eBay and someone leaves me a comment and says, no, I found one. That's just kind of how it is with arcade collecting, especially with some of the rarer Sega stuff. You won't see one for a year, and then suddenly 4 will go for sale in a week. So if you're looking for one, definitely set a save search, because this is the type of game, if you have a game room and you want to play with friends when they come over, this is a super fun game, especially if you want to do a side-by-side cabinet for it, or even have it running on a super gun with those 2 screens playing at once. It's just fun, it's action-packed, it's fast, and you get a lot of mileage out of a game like this with friends. It's one that I definitely do recommend. And I just love this era of Sega. All of their stuff right before they transitioned to 3D, all of the 2D sprites and the scaling and hardware that they used on these boards, I think was the pinnacle of what people could do with 2D technology. And you'll see here that I got a 10-9 game. I just need one more point to get it done, but of course the CPU is just going to be able to sink that shot. That always happens. If you're 1 point away from winning and they need 2 points to beat you, 10 out of 10 times I just watch them sink the shot, and for some interesting reason, after you use a continue, the other team seems to get even better. I know in NBA Jam there's been evidence via the code decompilation that they were actually articulating the difficulty of the game and the abilities of both your team and your opponent's team to make it harder, and I think Sega's doing the same thing here, because they do want your quarters, and with a sports game that's pure skill, there's got to be a way to make it harder for you to win, and it does seem like they adjust the difficulty on the fly. But if you are having too much trouble at regular mode, I suggest you go into the test menu and you can go ahead and change the difficulty of this game. It starts off at 3 out of 8 difficulty. You can bring it all the way down to 1 if you want until you learn the game. Use those test menus. And like I said, I would show you, this is what it looks like in the multi-mode, because this was the System 32 multi, which allowed for 2 instances of the game to run at the same time. I'm not sure how they're doing it in code. It could be 1 instance and just showing 2 screens. It could be 2 instances networked together. I haven't taken the board apart to check and see, but it is fun. You can see on a 16:9 monitor, it fits extremely well. But is this as good as NBA Jam? Well, no, it's not. I don't think anything's ever going to be as good as NBA Jam, but Hard Dunk comes really close to it, and it's part of that Sega arcade lineage that we all know and love. And if you are looking for a new, fun 2D arcade game to play with friends, something in the sport genre you can really play back and forth and maybe even make your own tournament bracket on a whiteboard, I highly recommend Hard Dunk. It's a ton of fun, it's action-packed, and it's got that sprite scaling that I absolutely love. But yeah, that's about it. I lost. Bye-bye.